Yeah, my name's Roy Lorenzen. I'm a solution manager at Certus. Been working at Certus for 12 years, which is kind of scary when you think about it. Been doing mobile stuff for about the last 7 or 8 of those. So various solutions that we've gone through over the process. So I'm really happy to be here today and talk to you kind of about the modernisation of Maximo as it's been termed at this point in time. Before we do that, just going to talk about what it is in terms of becoming digital. So in terms of becoming digital, it's very much along the same lines as the way that we think as human beings today. So in our context, if you look at it, we've got all of these sensors out there in terms of our eyes, our ears, our touch, and we're basically processing all of these different data points as we come into contact with them. We then go through and we actually process all of that, and we start to understand what it is that we're sensing. And in a real life context right now, you're probably sensing that I'm exceptionally nervous, stood up here doing that. And I'm now processing in my head just what your reaction is, which was a little bit of a giggle. So it kind of makes me feel a little bit better about all of that. So that kind of completes the loop in terms of now that I've actually got that feedback, I can respond in a way that kind of makes me feel a little bit more at ease. So if we look at that in a digital context, we essentially have all of these sensors out there, and that includes our human beings as well through the use of mobile technology, that we go and collect all this different bits of data. We then put them back into our system of record and then run some sort of analytics over it or start to understand what it is that data is telling us. And then that gives us the correct response to go back, whether it is to go and actually fix that machine, to replace it, whatever it kind of actually might be. So thinking in a digital context is not actually that different from kind of how we behave today. The main title around this was digital modernisation. So I always like to kind of start these presentations with a bit of a definition about what modernisation is. So I think about it in the context of modernisation as in we've got a house, it was built in the 1960s. So I might modernise the kitchen or the bathroom by kind of actually, improving it, give it a bit more of a look and feel in terms of, make it a bit more streamlined, maybe white benches because they're the in vogue sort of thing at the moment. So that's kind of like a modernisation of a house. But as part of that, I might actually make changes to the structure of it. The old triangle between the stove and the sink and the kitchen sort of thing comes into play, which as people keep telling me about all the time. And I'm like, who cares about the triangle? I don't. But they seem to. So in terms of that, we're not only are they looking at basically making my kitchen look nicer, they're actually making it look better in terms of how we actually use it as well. And that's very much when we look at it from a digital modernisation perspective as well, is we want to get something out of it. It's not just about making it look pretty. It's about making it more usable for the actual users themselves. And I've underlined the end user experience there because that's really the kind of the key goal. And I think some of these words are kind of around the wrong way because the end user experience is what we're actually trying to improve or modernise as part of that so that we can get some benefit out of the other things, like increased response times, faster fixes, that sort of thing, because all of that will be driven from the person in the field or in the office having access to a better user experience or more data that they need. Modernisation can kind of get a little bit confused with digital transformation sometimes as well. So a lot of people are sort of saying that I can't do a modernisation process because I haven't got a digital transformation process in as well. So while the two things might be linked, they can be independent of each other. So you don't need to kind of go on this massive transformation project, which is what my wife would prefer to do and rip out a whole bunch of walls, whereas I just want to replace the kitchen. So it's kind of a case of we can do a transformation or we can do a modernisation. But the two things can be independent, but they can also be highly dependent on each other as well. Because if you look at some of the key words in and around transformation, it is in and around people and process as well, but without kind of the platform and policy part to it in terms of the modernisation. But at the centre of it all, we can't forget about the user, okay? So words like UserCentric, personas, people-centric. That is kind of the key when we're looking at basically going through a modernization process. So it's really, really important that we do not lose sight of the end users that we're actually looking at. And it's not just the guys with the hard hats and the hammers and the spanners and the screwdrivers. It's also the people that sit within the office or the supervisors who are half and half or 60-40. So at the center of everything we do around modernization or transformation, we've got to keep a keen view on the users themselves and the things that they go through and they struggle with through their everyday lives. At the center of all of this is generally mobility. So it's funny because I put this slide up, it had a different picture to it, but it got me thinking about the first time I kind of did a presentation at a user group. It was down in Massey, and I basically did a presentation which was about the art of the possible at the time. It's weird because the art of the possible was this ridiculously heavy device which could be dropped from 2 meters high, was absolutely fine, had a built-in 2D barcode scanner, but it looked a bit like a brick, okay? What was also interesting is at the time, these things had kind of just started coming into vogue, smartphones. They weren't prevalent, they weren't out there, not everybody kind of had them, but the momentum was starting to gather there. So the art of the possible was all about being able to kind of do something that wasn't on a Windows CE based device. This is how long ago I'm kind of talking about. And also part of that presentation, we're talking about barcodes and RFIDs and how they were going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread to help asset management in terms of being able to track your assets. So it's amazing how sort of things definitely change. But in terms of that one, it was all about kind of being able to get people data out in the field. Whereas the context of this slide for me is slightly changed now. And it's not that, it's still that mobility is definitely the catalyst for the improvement, but it's more that it's being driven by our users. The expectation that they're going to have mobility, not necessarily that it's available to them, but hey, I've got this device in my everyday life, why can't I have it in my work life as well? So there's an expectation that basically mobile is going to be out there and I'm going to be able to get access to the data that I need to be able to get access to. I think the other 3 points that are there still certainly ring true as well. It's very much about capturing and validating data at the point in time where you are. So being able to do that at the source, being able to kind of enforce your business process as part of that as well. There's no point kind of just recreating a form and having no business process in and around that. It's very much about being able to kind of enhance the user experience by having validation there and then at that point in time. And it's about being able to have access to it. I think the new words, anywhere, anytime, so you can kind of see there we're on the right path there. It's basically real time, access to the systems, anytime, anywhere. So very, very similar in terms of what we are. But I think it still very much rings true. And it's amazing that how far, even though we've come so far in terms of the technology, the base principles are still kind of the sound from the last 7 or 8 years. As Michael said, we had the fortunate experience of being able to sort of interview with Pam and Tristan and basically talk with them about kind of IBM's approach in and around sort of modernization and Maximo and digital transformation as well, and kind of how the different components within Anywhere and work centers would fit into that process. So I'll just let them introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Pam Denny. I am a Maximo offering manager for Maximo Anywhere and the other mobile products that we have in Maximo. I have been working with the Maximo product for over 20 years, and I'll be talking today mostly about the Maximo Anywhere solution.
So, hi, my name is Tristan O'Gorman. I'm a product architect with the Maximo team. I've been working with Maximo across the portfolio for about 10 years now. I'm currently responsible for some of the work center development, specifically the work management work centers, and I'm also involved with the asset performance management product.
So the first thing I wanted to do was just get an understanding from the two of them, just where the work centers and Anywhere kind of fit into what we would determine to be a good user experience.
So on the question, the Maximo user experience is changing in many, many different ways to meet the changing needs of all of our different users, our clients, and our business partners. We've seen a great transformation in the use of our mobile products, so moving from pen and paper to the tablets to the smartphones, whether you're using the Maximo Work Centers or Maximo Anywhere, and really being able not only for the user to have information available to them at any time and any place, but also for us to capture critical information from that user, whether they're in the field or a disconnected location in their plant or facility.
So to follow on to Pam's point, specifically around work centers, you know, they were born out of a need we identified almost 2-3 years ago now, where we were seeing things in the market, seeing things at our clients where they were having an aging workforce that were, you know, retiring, which was driving a demand for much more intuitive applications that appeal to a much younger and often less experienced workforce. So we kind of reimagine some of Maximo functionality in the context of these work centers in what we called a user outcome driven design. And you know, the pillars of this new approach were, number one, keep things simple, right? So redesign the core Maximo components so that interacting with the system is as simple as possible. Number two, pull information and content and actions out of our existing application structure in core Maximo and make them relevant to the users at the moment that they need them. And the third one, which is kind of key, was that the users should have the same experience no matter what device they held in their hand. So if they were trained on a desktop, they could apply those learnings equally as easily on a mobile device. So that was really the genesis of the work center in the context of user experience. But I would like to say, you know, across all of our applications, user experience is key. Even in the so-called classic Maximo applications, they were really targeted at power users who churn through vast amounts of data entry every day. And so for those users, that user interface, that experience is perfectly optimized. So this is just offering another avenue for let's say, the casual Maximo user or the inexperienced Maximo user to get quickly up and running with our system.
So you can see there, they both are very concentrated on, in terms of having a good user experience from a design perspective. So it all very much is starting at the design level and building all the way out to making sure that the user is very much at the center of any design kind of task. The next kind of question I asked them was in and around kind of based on that, how is that kind of feeding up into the roadmap?
The Maximo roadmap, we are so excited about it as it relates to the Maximo mobile products, especially Anywhere. We have a very exciting release planned for Maximo Anywhere, scheduled for Q1 of 2020. In that release, we've gathered a lot of input from our Maximo clients, our business partners. We've talked to people at conferences, during many web sessions, and we've gathered all their feedback. And basically, the feedback that people were asking for was for us to simplify Anywhere, make it easier to install, to utilize, to deploy. They also highlighted to us that it was extremely critical that any investment, any configuration change that they've made to the Maximo Anywhere applications be retained as we move forward. And lastly, clients want to grow with the Anywhere product. They want to grow the usage within their current deployments. So all these three features, simplification, retainment of investment, and growth, has rolled up into our next Maximo Anywhere release, where we'll capitalize more on the Maximo core functionality and remove our middleware component, which is mobile first. Enabling this will set us up for significant growth and simplification as we move forward, and we're really excited about this release in 2020.
And you can see there just how excited Pam is about kind of the release and the changes that they're actually making to the framework and to the platform itself. And that comes through even more when you kind of talk to her off camera. She is really happy about kind of where things are going with Anywhere. I think it's quite a big change for them in terms of what they're doing, removing that IBM mobile first middleware component. And it certainly is definitely going to free up a lot of being able to pull that natural functionality out of Maximo and to be able to then be used out in the field. So you can see there in terms of the roadmap, and you'll see this over the next couple of days at the user group, that very much the focus is on getting that foundation right to enable them to kind of be able to launch into something which is be pretty great, I think. The work centres are a bit different. They've been around for a few years now, so they're kind of in a slightly different phase around where things are going, and I'll let Tristan talk to the roadmap for 2020.
Of exciting things planned around the work centres too. So what we will see coming into 2020 is continuing investment in the ones that we have already today. So think of work execution, work supervision, inspections, service requests. They are the most popular ones amongst our clients. So we are responding to client feature requests, making them more mature along the way. I think what we'll also see in 2020 is a maturation of our UI framework that supports these. So you'll see much faster work centers, much more capabilities in and around configuration. And thirdly, I think what we'll see is the alignment to a certain extent between Anywhere and work centers, following a common strategy, building on the same technology platform eventually, so that clients can have a much richer set of choices when they want to work with Maximo.
So yeah, also a lot of excitement in and around the work centres. So certainly building on their framework to make them from a performance perspective, but also a configurability perspective. I think a lot of the feedback that has been coming back is just kind of how to make these things more configurable, make them so that they can be configurable. So that's great to see that that's coming in the 2020 roadmap. The thing that I'm kind of really excited about is what's up in the top left-hand corner too, particularly in and around inventory. I think it's an area from a mobile perspective that could be utilised greatly. It's kind of been underutilised at the moment because sort of the applications or the tools that are out there are not really fit for purpose in terms of what they need, but certainly what's coming through in the work centres is looking really promising around what we're sort of driving for from an inventory perspective. The other thing is what's in the top right-hand corner. And I think specifically in and around our service providers or our facilities management customers, the ability for that work centre service request process, that workflow process, I think will be invaluable. The ability to have guest users, I think, will get around a lot of the hiccups that we've got in terms of having to record who it is that's actually raising that service request. So I think there's lots of good things, particularly coming from that top row for 2020. One thing that I did pick up when I was talking to them was in and around the technology change that's coming for both Anywhere and in terms of the work centres. And Tristan mentioned it as part of when he was talking about the roadmap, this convergence of the technologies between the actual two. So I just asked them just to kind of expand, or ask Pam just to expand on that a little bit more.
It's so exciting when we talk about the Maximo work centers and their ability to display responsively on a tablet and phone. And it naturally brings up the questions with Maximo Anywhere, which we've had in the marketplace for over 7 years now, the ability to download an app and essentially perform some of that same type level of functionality, accessing Maximo on your device, whether it's a tablet or the phone. And we've seen this continual evolution, as Tristan has mentioned, on an improved UI interface, really focusing on modernizing the interface for that simple, seamless experience. But as we've seen this evolution on the UI, we are also in the process right now of evolving the technology. What can we do to eventually bring all of the Maximo mobile products on the same technology platform, making it easier for our clients and our business partners and ourselves within IBM to both administer, maintain, and continue to deliver more and more features and functionality. So we believe over the next few years, you will hear more and more about a technology convergence, our continued investment in both platforms. I highlighted earlier how important it is for our next Maximo Anywhere release. We are committed to Anywhere. We are continuing to invest in it. But at the same time, we're always evolving both the UI and the technology for a better mobile experience for both our clients, our business partners, and also the IBM family as a whole.
And it's really exciting to hear that, particularly for somebody who's been involved with mobile for so long, the convergence of these technologies to allow us to be able to just extend Maximo Classic, to use Tristan's words, out into the field using the same technology, whether it be online, offline. I think the drive for being able to do that is certainly one that we're all kind of looking for, I think, from IBM in terms of how it's coming. The third thing that we wanted to talk about today was in and around sort of the Certus user experience, or Certus Mobile, as it's called. So it's very important to us to be able to offer up to our customers this ability to be able to provide that user experience for the different users that are out there, or the different personas that are out there. So Certus, the Certus user experience is very much built in and around from a technology perspective, but is very much a user-focused scenario. So looking at the 2 Ps that I pointed out from a transformation perspective, it's very much around people and process. So the ability to be able to take a particular role, take a particular business process, and make that available to users out in the field is very much centered around the purpose of what the Certus Mobile capacity is supposed to do. And in particular, it's around those different processes. So it might be something that is not necessarily sits within Maximo. It could be extending out, and in this example was sort of extending out to capturing data in the field in a particular way, but also interaction with ArcGIS maps in a particular way, so that data is flowing between the 2 different systems. But not just ArcGIS, but Survey 123 as well. So this is a use case from a customer who is in the room, I can see down the back. So it's very much in and around what we're driving to do with having a different user experience outside of both Anywhere and the work centers as well. Talk too fast, or the video's too slow, one of the two. So that's kind of where we're going. In terms of a roadmap around this, it's very much going to be driven by our customers. So it's customer focused, process focused, people focused around where this kind of ends up. But certainly a commitment to being able to offer this as a third example, a third option. So you're probably all scratching your heads and going, well, what solution when? You've given me 3 excellent options there, but when do I use which ones? So there's very different scenarios in and around this, and you can kind of see the guy scratching his head and a whole bunch of questions around kind of, well, do I need offline? Do I need online? Is it a combination of both? Kind of where do we kind of go with all of this? And I guess the answer is kind of there isn't a one size fits all, right? So there isn't going to be one solution out there right now that will fit every possible option that you will have as far from a modernization or a digital transformation process. But it's certainly in and around kind of being able to understand what option fits best for which scenario that you want. So I asked Tristan a question. Press the right button would help. I asked Tristan a question around, from a work centers, being the new kid on the block, where does that kind of fit into to a modernization or digital transformation process?
Work centers are a very interesting proposition for clients that are about to embark on a digital transformation strategy. We see very exciting implementations at clients that have taken an approach where they want to use work centers to bring either less experienced people from a Maximo perspective, or people that have not so much experience from a enterprise mobile software perspective into the digital realm, right? So at the end of the day, the purpose of digitization is to enable the data that you need to drive business value. And so when you think about it, work centers are at the beginning of that effort, right? So getting the data into the system. And so to do that, you need to enable ease of use, ease of access, and ease of data entry. And so the clients that we are working with tend to see work centers as the beginning of that. The most successful ones we've worked with are those that have tended to start small. Customers that have sites or teams that are moving from a legacy system or moving from a not so efficient work process, using work centers as a way to drive better interactions with the Maximo system, getting better data into the system. So we see work centers, from my perspective, as the ideal starting point for a digital transformation of your maintenance org.
And it's great what Tristan just said there, because it's not just for work centres. You can take what he said there and take it across, basically, from a mobility perspective or a user experience perspective for that. It's all about data driving business value, and it's very much around kind of starting small and going from there. So I put up a picture of snakes and ladders there because that's sometimes what it kind of feels like a little bit. You've got this end goal, which is square 100, right? So everybody's trying to get there. And you're going along this journey and you're making these steps, and sometimes you'll hit a ladder and you'll make some great strides forward and everybody will be really happy with you. Sometimes you'll hit a snake and you'll slide back a little bit. Hopefully not a big long snake, just a small snake. But it's all very it's all very much about kind of how you then deal with that. And that's why I've kind of put some of these things in there in terms of how to start. So there's a lot of patience involved when you're going on a transformation journey or even a modernization journey as well. Nobody expects you to sort of go out and pick your colors for your kitchen and then it be installed the next day. It takes time. There's some demolition that needs to be done sometimes, and very much there's a lot of time where you need to build things back up again as well. And then there's going to be hidden stuff that you just didn't even think about. So the idea is kind of to pick a process or a role. So identify one of the needs, right? Identify a particular role or a particular persona where they're friendlies, but also they're going to get a lot of value out of what you're actually doing for them. Keep that user-centric approach. Make sure whatever you do, you're focused on that particular role or that particular persona. That has got to be the center of kind of everything that you actually do, because if you get that right, then you're going to get the data that you need and you're going to get the business value that you need as well. This is probably the most important one and probably the hardest one to actually do, particularly if you're doing a reno, which I know Michael has done recently as well, is you've got to be prepared to listen, learn, evaluate, and execute. And that very much comes back to the very first slide that we went through today. It's about understanding what's kind of in front of you, processing that, evaluating it, and then responding in the appropriate way. Because any journey that you take is going to have snakes. There's also going to be ladders as well. So make sure you take advantage of the ladders and the lessons that you learned out of those to be able to then springboard the next little phase that you actually go through and try and avoid the snakes if you can. But sliding down a snake is not the end of the world, okay? You're still in the game. So you've still got your target, you've still got your square 100 to go for, so you can kind of just then start to iterate, but learn from that and carry on as you go through. But one of the most important things, I guess, is not to lose sight of what that 100 is. Oops. So where can we go? What is the vision that we want to get to? Where do we want to actually be? When we hit square 100, what do we want to actually do? Because there's a number of steps to actually get there, but let's not lose sight of the end goal in terms of where we're trying to get to from a modernization or transformation process. Is that VI? Is it AR? Is it some augmented collaboration, or is it EMA, and equipment and maintenance assistance? So basically, let's understand where it is our journey needs to actually get there, and then take some small steps, whether that be proof of concepts, pilots, to be able to drive that journey. Thank you.
So I hope that gives you a bit of a taste of the options that are out there. Really keen to get your feedback, and also Russell is part of the team with Pam and Tristan at the back, who's also here and can ask questions. So great opportunity to really interested in your feedback and any questions you might have. Maybe one. Yay!
Yeah, yes. So that's a great question. So I'll replay it there. So in terms of your question, it's in and around sort of remote location, aging workforce. How do we kind of get them to make the change, or how do we, I guess, what's the carrot essentially to be able to get them to actually change? Because you're right, the change is expensive in terms of what you're doing that. But I guess in terms of, did I get the question right? Yep, cool. So in terms of that, I guess not changing is probably more expensive, because you're going to have all of these guys that are going to leave at some point in time and take all of this knowledge with them without kind of it being fed back into the business. So while it is kind of expensive to make this change at the moment, it's probably more expensive for you not to actually make the change. In terms of how you incentivize them or give them the carrot to be able to help drive through that change, I think it's definitely, you need to include them, right? So you need to make it all about them, essentially. So we're going to make your job easier for you. So it might be that for a period of time, we're going to take you off the tools, right? But you're going to become the center of excellence for this particular job, role, whatever it might be. And all of the questions are going to get fed up into you, and we're going to start to slowly extract the knowledge out of your head to get it to a point where we can kind of start to digitize that. Cool. Thanks. Phew.
Giving them a free iPad helps.
Free iPads always help. Yeah, most definitely. Although you also will need to be intrinsically safe. So. No, we're not, and that's one of the things is all three can complement each other really, really well, and it kind of comes back to the user-centric approach. So what's best for the user and what's best for and the process as well that you're actually trying to implement. So they all have their strengths and weaknesses. Like that's just software. That's how it is. But it's very much about sort of going, and I said before, there's no one size fits all at the moment. There's not one thing that's going to answer all of your needs from a transformation approach. So you very much need to make sure that you're picking the right thing for the right place, because there's a lot of users out there, and a particular role might use the work center's inventory stuff, right? So they're doing that. Their role, their job is very much in and around the inventory. They're not going to touch work orders apart from issuing stuff to them. So they don't need to know that the guys out in the field have a completely different work management application, which is Anywhere or Certus Mobile, or work centers for that case. So because the roles are quite different in terms of that, you can get away with being able to use the right technology for the right particular role. And because they all come back to that center, which is Maximo, for them, it's just about kind of what they see on the device that they have.
Can I take that example a little bit further and go back to the organisations that are living in legacy situations of the 80s and 90s, where contractual guru was the thing and everything was pushed out and they lost the expertise within their own organisation. What's the proposals for making it easy to bring the contractors back within the fold of the Maximo usage as well?
That's a really good one, and that's a big challenge, I think, that's out there at the moment, is because you've got all of this knowledge, and the trouble is you don't even have control of that knowledge because it's not even within your workforce. So in terms of being able to do that, it's very much around how you collect the data. So making sure that when you're getting them to use the application, or when they're actually out on the job, that you're collecting as much of the information that you can out of them so that it's coming back into Maximo. Once it's in there, then you've got control of it. You can then start to mine it. You can then start to actually analyze it and do whatever you need to actually be able to do with it, to then be able to inform your decisions about whether or not you go, we're going to keep using that contractor, or actually, out of the other skill sets that we've got, we can actually train these guys to do that as well. So very much being able to sort of give them the app so that you can actually collect the data that you need to be able to pull it back in, to pull that knowledge back in-house.
What are some of the hurdles you've helped other organisations overcome as they're going mobile?
I think the biggest one for them is generally the change management process. So in terms of how they roll mobile out. So it's very much in answer to the other question before, is you got to get them involved. So the projects where we've got the users involved and they feel and they own it, they can then start to get the word of mouth out there going, hey, there's this really cool thing that's actually coming along. It's going to make our job so much better. If you kind of keep them isolated, and this tended to be what used to happen, is you used to push it out to them and go, right, you're now going to use this. I'm taking your comfort blanket away from you, but you're now going to use this. So very much around getting them involved, having them as part of the journey, essentially, so that they can not only can they kind of see the end result, but they can see all the work that goes into it as well, and really start to own it. Yep.
Do you have a roadmap for the Certus mobility app? What does that look like?
Yeah, so it's very much going to be driven by the needs of our customers in terms of what they want. So we've gone through the process of getting ArcGIS and up and running and in there, and now we can launch out to other apps and around Survey 123. So we've very much got that, and that was very much driven by a particular customer that wanted to do. We've got another couple of customers as well who are really starting to help drive some of the process. So it's very much based on what the needs are, and that will help kind of drive it. But once those things are kind of in play, then they start to kind of get publicised about what's going to be available.